If it were me, I would have handled it differently. What if everything you believed about your family, every moment of love, every memory, every bond, could be shattered by a single piece of paper? What if one test could rewrite your identity and someone else's future? A nation divided by truth and love. In the heart of America's Midwest, where cherished family values collide with the unrelenting precision of scientific evidence, a modest courtroom in Wisconsin became the crucible for a drama that seized the nation's attention. A wide shot of a Wisconsin courtroom, bathed in fluorescent light, with an empty judge's bench and a gavel resting prominently. The room feels heavy with anticipation, with subtle details like legal documents scattered on tables and a faint American flag in the background. The mood is tense, with muted colors, grays, blues, to convey the weight of impending judgment. This is not merely the story of a man, a woman, and a child entangled in a web of love and deception. It is a narrative that demands we confront profound, unsettling questions. What truly defines a father? Is it the biological bond of shared DNA, or the countless hours of devotion, sacrifice, and presence poured into a child's life? Should biology hold dominion over loyalty and commitment? Or does the truth, no matter how devastating, always deserve to reign supreme? An abstract composition showing a DNA double helix intertwined with a heart, set against a split background, one half cold and scientific, blues, whites, the other warm and emotional, reds, oranges, subtle silhouettes of a man, woman, and child in the foreground hint at the human stakes. The case of Ethan Carter and Rachel Ellis is more than a legal dispute. It is a mirror reflecting a society wrestling with its deepest principles. It unfolded under the harsh fluorescent lights of a courtroom, where a judge's gavel could shatter dreams as swiftly as it could deliver justice. This saga began with the warmth of love, descended into a maelstrom of chaos, and culminated in a DNA test that redefined destinies. When the verdict was announced, the silence that enveloped the room was not merely an absence of sound but the suffocating weight of countless possible futures collapsing into a single, irreversible moment. This is their story, woven with vivid detail, spanning years of hope, heartbreak, and unyielding determination. It is a tale that will challenge your convictions about family, fidelity, and the cost of truth. And when it concludes, you will be left with a haunting question that lingers like a shadow. What would you do if you stood in their shoes? The man who drove 160 miles for love. Ethan Carter was not a man who commanded attention. At 32, he was lean, with a close-cropped haircut and a wardrobe of faded flannel shirts and scuffed work boots. He labored as a mechanic in a small garage in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, where brutal winters gnawed at the bones and his paycheck barely kept the lights on. Ethan in his Oshkosh garage, mid-30s, lean, in a grease-stained flannel, working on a car engine under harsh fluorescent lights. Tools are scattered, and a small photo of Lily is taped to his toolbox. His face weary but determined. His life was unremarkable: work, sleep, repeat. Yet one thing set Ethan apart: his unwavering devotion to a 3-year-old girl named Lily, who carried his last name and a smile that could melt the iciest heart. Lily was more than a child to Ethan, she was his purpose. The spark that ignited his every morning. She was the reason he drove 160 miles every other weekend. Through rain, snow, or blistering heat, in a battered 2003 Honda Civic that groaned with every mile. Ethan driving his battered 2003 Honda Civic on a snowy Wisconsin highway at dusk. The road stretching endlessly. The interior shows a duffel bag, snacks, and Lily's stuffed unicorn on the passenger seat. His expression is focused, with a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. The radio glowing faintly. The car's odometer had logged over 10,000 miles from those journeys alone. Trips to hold Lily's tiny hand, to push her on a park swing, to hear her giggle as she stumbled over pronouncing spaghetti at a roadside diner. Ethan was neither wealthy nor polished, but when it came to Lily, he was unstoppable. Every other Friday, he'd clock out of the garage, hands still smudged with grease, and hit the road. The drive to Rachel Ellis's apartment in Madison took 2.5 hours. Sometimes 3 in heavy snow. He'd pack a duffel bag with snacks, a change of clothes, and a stuffed unicorn Lily adored. He'd play her favorite Disney songs on the radio, singing along in a voice more gravel than melody, his heart swelling with anticipation. When he pulled up to Rachel's building, he'd wait, pulse racing, for the door to swing open and Lily to bound out, her pigtails bouncing as she shouted, "Daddy!" A joyful moment as Lily, a 3-year-old with pigtails, runs out of Rachel's Madison apartment, arms outstretched, shouting, "Daddy!" Ethan kneels to catch her, his face lighting up with love. The apartment building is modest, with winter bare trees in the background, and warm light spills from the door. Those weekends were sacred, etched into Ethan's soul. He'd take Lily to the zoo, where she'd point at giraffes and ask if they ever forgot to duck under branches. Ethan and Lily at the zoo. Lily pointing excitedly at a giraffe, her face alight with wonder. Ethan holds her hand, a cheap ice cream cone melting in his other hand, his expression tender. The scene is vibrant, with warm colors to contrast the story's darker tones. He'd buy her ice cream, even if it meant skipping his own lunch to afford it. He'd read her bedtime stories, mimicking every character's voice until her eyelids fluttered shut. Ethan sitting on Lily's bed in Rachel's apartment, reading a storybook, doing exaggerated voices. Lily, clutching her unicorn, giggles, her eyes heavy with sleep. The room is cozy but cluttered, with toys strewn about, and soft lamplight casting warm shadows. And every Sunday evening, when he dropped her off, he'd hold her a little tighter, knowing 2 weeks would pass before he'd see her again. Beyond the visits, Ethan paid child support, $48.75 a week, deducted directly from his paycheck, plus $5 in state fees. It wasn't much, but for a man living paycheck to paycheck, it was a significant sacrifice. He kept receipts, stacks of them, meticulously organized in a shoebox under his bed. He didn't pay out of obligation, he paid because he wanted Lily to have the opportunities he never had, a chance at a better life. Even if it meant he went without. Ethan's love for Lily shone in the small, quiet moments. He once drove through a blizzard to attend her first dance recital, only to find it cancelled. He spent his last $20 on a cheap plastic tiara because Lily declared she wanted to be a princess. He paced the hospital waiting room, praying, when Rachel went into labor, arriving before anyone else because he couldn't bear the thought of Lily entering the world without him there. But one thing eluded Ethan: certainty. For 3 years, he'd pleaded for a DNA test to confirm his paternity. For 3 years, he'd been denied, and for 3 years, a question gnawed at him, growing louder with each passing day: was Lily truly his daughter? The woman who held the secret. Across the courtroom sat Rachel Ellis, a 29-year-old single mother with sharp, guarded eyes and a smile that rarely reached them. To the outside world, Rachel was a fighter, a woman who'd clawed her way through adversity, raising her daughter alone in a society often unforgiving to women in her position. She worked double shifts as a bartender at a gritty Madison dive bar, scraping together rent for a one-bedroom apartment where Lily's toys spilled across the living room floor. Rachel was tough, no question, but to Ethan, she was an enigma wrapped in defiance, a puzzle he could never fully solve. Rachel and Ethan's story began 5 years earlier in the smoky haze of a bar, where Ethan was fixing a broken jukebox and Rachel was pouring whiskey shots with a practiced hand. Prompts: 8, a smoky Wisconsin bar. Rachel, late 20s, sharp-eyed, tough, pouring whiskey behind the counter, smirking as Ethan fixes a jukebox. The atmosphere is lively, with dim lighting, neon signs, and rowdy patrons, capturing their initial chemistry. Their connection was immediate, 2 lonely souls in a small town, drawn together by shared laughter and late-night conversations over cheap beer. Ethan was captivated by Rachel's quick wit and her ability to hold her own in a room full of rowdy patrons. Rachel saw something in Ethan too, a quiet strength. A man who showed up when he said he would. A rarity in her world. For a time, their relationship was a refuge. They moved in together, splitting rent on a cramped apartment above a laundromat, the hum of dryers lulling them to sleep. Ethan and Rachel in their cramped apartment above a laundromat, sitting at a small table, laughing over takeout. The room is cluttered but warm, with a pawn shop ring on the table, symbolizing their engagement. The scene is nostalgic, tinged with hope. They dreamed of a future, marriage, children, a house with a backyard where they could watch their kids play. Ethan proposed one night on a whim, with a $50 ring from a pawn shop, and Rachel said yes, her eyes shining with hope. They were engaged, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed full of possibility. But love, like all fragile things, can crack under pressure. Ethan's long hours at the garage left him drained, coming home reeking of oil and exhaustion. Rachel's late-night shifts at the bar meant slim tips and mounting bills, the stress fraying their bond. They fought, over money, over time, over dreams that felt increasingly out of reach. A tense moment in the same apartment. Ethan and Rachel mid-fight, faces strained. Ethan's in his work clothes, Rachel's in a bartender's apron, bills piled on the table. The room feels claustrophobic, with shadows deepening the mood of fracturing love. And then came the accusations of infidelity. Rachel claimed Ethan cheated first, sneaking off to meet women at bars, texting them behind her back for months. Ethan admitted to a single lapse, a one-night fling with a coworker at the tail end of their relationship. When the cracks were already too wide to mend, Rachel insisted it was more, accusing him of serial infidelity, weaving lies like a seasoned con artist. She said she lost all respect for him, her trust shattered beyond repair. Rachel alone in the apartment after their breakup, staring at a pregnancy test, her face a mix of shock and fear. The room is dark, with rain pattering against the window, emphasizing her isolation and the weight of her secret. Ethan didn't fully buy her narrative. He saw the fury in her eyes, heard the venom in her voice, and believed her efforts to block his access to Lily weren't about protecting her daughter but about punishing him for his betrayal. And so, their love curdled into conflict. And they went to war. A war of paper and pain. Their battle was not fought with fists or weapons but with court filings, custody petitions, and endless hearings that drained their meager resources. Ethan hired a lawyer he could barely afford, a grizzled public defender named Tom, who smelled of stale coffee and cigarettes but believed passionately in Ethan's cause. Rachel chose to represent herself, armed with a stack of handwritten notes and a fierce determination to keep Lily out of Ethan's reach. The first hearing came in 2012, when Lily was just 6 months old. Ethan sought joint custody, arguing he'd been there for Lily since the moment she was born. A smaller courtroom, Ethan sitting nervously with Tom, his grizzled lawyer, while Rachel stands alone, clutching handwritten notes. The judge, a stern woman, looms at the bench. The mood is formal but tense, with Ethan's hopeful expression contrasting Rachel's resolve. Rachel countered that Ethan was unreliable, unfaithful, and unfit to be a father, painting him as a man who'd betrayed her trust and didn't deserve a role in their daughter's life. The judge, a stern woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, granted Ethan supervised visitation, 2 hours every other Saturday at a community center, under the watchful eye of a social worker. The ruling stung like a slap, but Ethan accepted it. Any time with Lily was worth enduring the humiliation. Rachel, however, was relentless. She filed motion after motion, each one chipping away at Ethan's rights. Rachel at a kitchen table in her apartment, writing legal motions by lamplight, her face set in determination. Lily's toys are scattered in the background, a reminder of the stakes. The scene is quiet but intense, showing her solitary fight. She claimed he missed visits, though he hadn't. She alleged he skipped child support payments, despite his meticulously kept receipts proving otherwise. Ethan at home, sitting on his bed, surrounded by stacks of child support receipts in a shoebox. His face is weary but determined. A single photo of Lily tucked among the papers, symbolizing his commitment. She argued that Lily was better off without him, that his presence confused her, that he wasn't her real father. That final accusation struck Ethan like a blow to the chest. He'd signed the birth certificate, given Lily his last name, been there in the hospital when she took her first breath. How could he not be her father? The DNA test became Ethan's obsession. He begged the court for one, insisting that the truth would settle the matter once and for all. If Lily was his, he'd fight with every ounce of strength he had. If she wasn't, he didn't know what he'd do, but he needed to know. Rachel resisted at every turn, calling the test unnecessary, claiming it would traumatize Lily, asserting that Ethan didn't deserve the truth after his betrayal. The court, citing Wisconsin's legal standard of prioritizing the best interests of the child, repeatedly sided with Rachel, leaving Ethan's pleas unanswered. Yet Ethan refused to surrender. He kept driving those 160 miles, kept paying child support, kept showing up despite Rachel's obstacles, last-minute cancellations, unannounced moves, ignored phone calls. Ethan driving through a rainstorm, wipers struggling, his face etched with frustration but resolve. The unicorn is still on the passenger seat, a constant amidst Rachel's obstacles, symbolizing his unwavering love. He showed up because Lily deserved a father, and because he couldn't imagine a world where he wasn't hers. The truth Rachel kept. Rachel's version of events was starkly different, delivered with a conviction that left no room for doubt. She insisted Lily could not be Ethan's daughter, not biologically. She claimed that in March 2011, when Lily was conceived, she and Ethan were on a break. Ethan had gone to Las Vegas for a friend's bachelor party, leaving her alone in Oshkosh, heartbroken and reeling from their fractured relationship. In her vulnerability, she said, she met a man named Jake, a transient passing through town. Rachel in a dimly lit bar. Talking with Jake, a rugged transient in his 30s. Their faces close, her expression vulnerable, the background is blurred, focusing on their fleeting connection. With a sense of impermanence. They had a brief fling. A fleeting moment of weakness. And then Jake vanished, moved away. Changed his number. Gone without a trace. Rachel said she didn't realize she was pregnant until weeks later. By then, she and Ethan had reconciled. Patching up their relationship and reviving their plans for a future together. When Lily was born, Rachel made a choice. She let Ethan sign the birth certificate. Gave Lily his last name. And allowed him to believe he was the father. A hospital room. Rachel in labor. Exhausted but determined. As Ethan paces anxiously in the waiting area. Clutching a coffee cup. The scene contrasts Rachel's pain with Ethan's hope. The moment he becomes daddy. Why? Because they were supposed to marry. Because she wanted to believe in the dream of a family. A stable home for her daughter. Because, perhaps, in her heart, she still loved him. Rachel in the hospital, holding newborn Lily, looking at Ethan as he signs the birth certificate. Her face is conflicted, love, guilt, hope, knowing she's withholding the truth. The room is sterile but warm, with soft light on Lily. But 3 months after Lily's birth, their fragile world collapsed. A mutual friend revealed Ethan's infidelity, stories of late-night texts. Secret meetups with other women. Rachel was done. She kicked Ethan out, filed for sole custody, and began planting seeds of doubt. She's not yours. There was someone else. You have no claim. Rachel alone in her apartment. Packing Ethan's belongings after learning of his infidelity. Her face is a mix of anger and resolve. A legal custody form on the table. Marking the start of her fight. She had no concrete proof. Only her story. But she clung to it with fierce determination. Rachel's supporters, her friends, co-workers, and mother, saw her as a victim. A woman betrayed by a man who couldn't keep his promises. They admired her strength, her resilience, her refusal to back down in the face of adversity. But Ethan's allies, his co-workers, his lawyer, his sister, saw something else. A woman using her daughter as a weapon. Punishing a man who'd done nothing but show up for Lily. Despite the chaos. The day of reckoning. By the time Ethan and Rachel faced off in Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom in 2014. Their feud had become a local legend in Oshkosh and Madison. Friendships had fractured, families had taken sides, and the community buzzed with gossip. The case, featured on the daytime TV show, Paternity Court, under the title, Carter vs. Ellis, drew millions of viewers across the country. Each one waiting with bated breath for the moment of truth. The courtroom was packed to capacity, reporters scribbling notes, neighbors whispering, curious strangers craning their necks for a better view. A wide shot of Judge Lake's courtroom, packed with reporters, neighbors, and onlookers. Ethan sits on one side, Rachel on the other, Lily's grandmother in the gallery holding a photo. Judge Lake presides, her presence commanding, the gavel poised. Ethan sat on one side, his hands clasped tightly, his eyes fixed on the floor as if it might offer solace. He wore a clean shirt borrowed from his brother, his hair combed for the first time in weeks. A small act of dignity in a moment of vulnerability. Rachel sat across from him, her arms crossed, her jaw set, dressed in a black blazer that radiated defiance. In the gallery, Lily's grandmother sat quietly, clutching a framed photo of the little girl who wasn't present but was the heart of the entire drama. Judge Lauren Lake, presiding with a blend of compassion and steely authority, wasted no time. She'd seen countless cases like this, messy, emotional, raw, but something about Ethan and Rachel's story cut deeper. Perhaps it was Ethan's quiet dignity, the way his voice trembled with love when he spoke of Lily. Perhaps it was Rachel's fierce resolve, the way she defended her choices even as the evidence mounted against her. Or perhaps it was the stakes, a child's future hanging in the balance. Her world poised to shift irrevocably. Ethan spoke first, his voice steady but thick with emotion. He recounted the 160-mile drives, the sacrifices, the boundless love he held for Lily. Ethan on the stand, voice breaking, showing photos of Lily and receipts. His face is raw with emotion. The audience visibly moved, some wiping tears. The courtroom feels intimate, focused on his love. He presented stacks of receipts for child support payments, call logs showing his attempts to reach Rachel, and photos of Lily, smiling at the zoo, laughing in his arms, sleeping with her stuffed unicorn. He admitted to his mistakes, the cheating, the arguments, but insisted they didn't diminish his role as Lily's father. "I don't care what the test says," he said, his voice breaking. "She's my daughter, And she always will be. Rachel took the stand next. Her story a mix of anger and sorrow. She spoke of Ethan's betrayal, of Jake's fleeting presence in her life, of her decision to let Ethan believe Lily was his, for Lily's sake. To give her a father, a family. Rachel on the stand, defiant but emotional, recounting Ethan's betrayal and her fling with Jake. Her hands grip her notes, her eyes avoiding Ethan's. The audience is split, some nodding, others skeptical. But now, she said, she wanted the truth. She wanted to move forward, to give Lily a clean slate, free from the lies and pain of the past. Her words were resolute, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt, a hint of regret. The audience was deeply divided. Some cheered for Ethan, moved by his unwavering devotion and the sacrifices he'd made. Others sided with Rachel, seeing her as a woman wronged, fighting for her daughter's truth in a world that often dismissed single mothers. Social media erupted with hashtags, hashtag Team Ethan, hashtag Team Rachel, hashtag Justice for Lily, spawning thousands of posts. Comment sections overflowed with passionate opinions. He's her dad. DNA or not. She lied to him for years. He cheated. He deserves this. What about the child caught in the middle? And then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Judge Lake held up the envelope containing the DNA results. Her face unreadable, her presence commanding absolute silence. The room seemed to hold its breath. The air thick with anticipation. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes your heart race. Judge Lake opening the envelope. Her face unreadable, as Ethan and Rachel brace themselves. The audience is frozen, some leaning forward, others covering their mouths, their faces a mix of shock and empathy. The gavel rests prominently on the bench, a symbol of impending judgment. A subtle detail, Ethan's pocket shows the edge of Lily's photo, grounds the moment in his love. She opened the envelope, read the results to herself, and then looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice steady but heavy with gravity. You are not the father. The fallout. The words struck Ethan like a freight train, crashing through the fragile scaffolding of his world. His knees buckled, and he gripped the table to keep from collapsing, his face crumpling in a mask of devastation. Ethan, after the verdict, slumped in his chair, hands covering his face, eyes hollow. The courtroom blurs around him, isolating his grief, with Lily's photo visible in his pocket. A low, guttural sound escaped his lips, not a cry, but a primal release of 3 years' worth of love and hope dissolving into nothing. His world, built on bedtime stories, zoo outings, and the faint scent of Lily's stuffed unicorn, collapsed in an instant. He didn't cry, not yet. He simply stared, his eyes hollow, as if the life had been drained from him. Across the room, Rachel's reaction was more subdued but no less telling. She let out a sharp gasp, not of sorrow but of relief, her hands clapping together briefly in an involuntary gesture, like a reflex she couldn't suppress. Rachel gasping, clapping briefly, then catching herself as the audience reacts. Her face shows relief tinged with guilt, her eyes avoiding Ethan. The courtroom's tension is palpable. The audience recoiled, some gasping, others whispering in disapproval. Judge Lake's eyes narrowed, her expression one of barely contained disapproval. That's a bold move, Ms. Ellis, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Mr. Carter may have wronged you in the past, but what you just did, cheering like this, is some kind of game. That tells me exactly where your priorities lie. Judge Lake leaning forward, her face stern, addressing Rachel with righteous fury. The audience is rapt, some nodding, others shocked, as Rachel's eyes well with tears. Rachel's face flushed crimson, her hands twisting in her lap. I'm sorry, she stammered, her voice barely audible. I held out hope for clarity. But the words rang hollow, unconvincing. Clarity for what? To prove Ethan wrong? To strip him of the one thing that gave his life meaning? To claim a victory that came at her daughter's expense? Judge Lake wasn't done. She leaned forward, her voice rising with a righteous fury that filled the room. You're a single mother, Ms. Ellis, with no one else stepping up to be in your child's life. What exactly are you celebrating? Because right now, this little girl doesn't just lose a father, she loses the only man who's ever shown up for her. Week after week, mile after mile, the audience was stunned into silence. Some nodded in agreement, their faces etched with empathy for Ethan, others murmured in disbelief. Torn by Rachel's perspective, Rachel's eyes filled with tears. But she held her ground, insisting she'd acted in Lily's best interest, protecting her from a man who wasn't her biological father. Yet Judge Lake's question hung in the air, unanswered and unanswerable. Where is this other man? Where is Lily's biological father? Rachel's response was faltering. I don't know, she said softly. Jake left. I tried to find him. But he's gone. He didn't want to be found. Her words carried a weight of resignation. Perhaps even shame. Perhaps she hadn't tried hard enough to locate Jake. Perhaps she feared what she might uncover, or what it would reveal about her own choices. Whatever the reason, one thing was undeniable. Ethan was out of Lily's life. And her biological father remained a phantom. A shadow with no substance. The aftermath and the debate. After the verdict, Ethan didn't storm out of the courtroom or unleash a torrent of anger. He simply sat there, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red and glistening, his hands trembling slightly. I don't know what I'm going to do, he whispered to his lawyer. Tom, his voice barely audible. She was my whole world. Ethan in his childhood bedroom, sitting on the bed, scrolling through Lily's photos on his phone. The room is dim, filled with old relics, baseball glove, car poster, emphasizing his retreat from life. Rachel, by contrast, slipped out of the courtroom quickly, avoiding the swarm of reporters and cameras waiting outside. She didn't speak to the press, didn't post on social media, didn't engage with the public frenzy that followed. Rachel in her new apartment, unpacking boxes, Lily playing nearby, her face is resolute but strained. A preschool drawing of a family on the fridge hinting at her inner conflict. But her friends did, taking to online platforms to praise her courage, calling her a survivor, a mother who'd fought for her truth against all odds. Ethan's supporters, however, were less kind, branding Rachel as vengeful, cruel, even selfish, accusing her of using her daughter to settle a personal score. The case ignited a firestorm that swept across the nation. Talk shows dissected every angle, from Ethan's devotion to Rachel's motivations. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to analyzing the legal and emotional complexities. A montage of TV screens showing talk shows, podcasts, and social media posts. Hashtag Team Ethan. Hashtag Team Rachel. Headlines flash. Paternity shocker. Who is Lily's father? The mood is chaotic, reflecting public division. Reddit threads exploded with theories. Some portraying Ethan as the true victim, a man who'd given everything, only to be betrayed by a system that valued biology over love. Others defended Rachel's pursuit of the truth, arguing that Ethan's infidelity justified her actions and that Lily deserved to know her real origins. A smaller but vocal group focused on Lily herself, the innocent child caught in the crossfire, who couldn't comprehend DNA tests or courtroom battles but would feel the absence of her daddy every other weekend. The debate transcended Ethan and Rachel, tapping into deeper societal questions. What is the role of a father in a child's life? How much weight should DNA carry in family law? What are the ethics of paternity fraud? And who bears the responsibility when the truth is withheld? A split-screen image, one side a DNA helix, cold and scientific, the other a family silhouette, warm and emotional. Text overlays like truth versus love and biology versus bond frame the societal clash. In Wisconsin, where the case unfolded, the law was clear. A man who signs a birth certificate is legally the father, unless a DNA test proves otherwise. But what about the moral dimension? Should a man who raises a child, loves her, sacrifices for her, lose his place in her life because of a test tube and a swab? The nation was divided. On one side stood those who championed biology above all else. The truth matters, they argued passionately. A child deserves to know her real father, and a man shouldn't be forced to raise someone else's child without consent. On the other side were those who elevated love over blood. Ethan was Lily's dad, they insisted. He showed up, he paid, he loved her unconditionally. That's what makes a father, not a genetic marker. The clash, science versus devotion, truth versus loyalty, raged in online forums, in barrooms, at family dinners across the country. It was a collision of values that left no one neutral. And at the heart of it all was Lily, a little girl unaware that her world had been irrevocably altered by a single piece of paper. The road ahead. In the months following the verdict, Ethan became a shadow of his former self. He quit his job at the garage, unable to focus, his mind consumed by the loss of Lily. He moved back into his parents' home in Oshkosh, sleeping in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by relics of a life that no longer felt real, a baseball glove from high school, a faded poster of a classic car, a box of letters he'd never sent to Lily. Ethan at a park, watching other fathers play with their kids, his face etched with longing. Lily's unicorn sits beside him, a painful reminder. The scene muted and somber. He stopped driving to Madison, stopped calling Rachel, stopped hoping for a reconciliation that would never come. Yet Ethan's love for Lily endured. A quiet, aching presence that refused to fade. He kept her photos on his phone, scrolling through them in the dead of night when the pain was too much to bear. He held onto her stuffed unicorn, its fabric still carrying the faint scent of her baby shampoo. And he asked himself, over and over, the same tortuous question: could he still be her father, even if the DNA said otherwise? Rachel, meanwhile, forged ahead with a semblance of normalcy. She landed a new job as a restaurant manager, moved into a better apartment, and embraced a fresh start. She told her friends she felt liberated, that the truth had set her free from the lies of the past. But in the quiet moments, when Lily asked, "Where's Daddy?" with her big, curious eyes, Rachel's heart ached. Rachel tucking Lily into bed, answering her question, "Where's Daddy?" with a strained smile. The room is cozy, but Rachel's eyes betray her uncertainty. Lily's drawing of a man nearby. She had no answers. She didn't know where Jake was, or if he'd ever want to be a father. She didn't know if she'd made the right choice. And the uncertainty gnawed at her. Lily, now 4 years old, started preschool, a new chapter in her young life. She drew pictures of her family in art class, a stick figure with pigtails, a woman with a smile, and a man who was sometimes there, sometimes absent, his presence fading like a ghost. Lily in preschool, drawing a family picture, herself, Rachel, and a faint male figure. Her face is quiet, introspective, the classroom bright but her mood subdued, capturing her unspoken grief. Her teachers noticed a change in her demeanor. She was quieter, more withdrawn. Her usual spark dimmed. They didn't know about the courtroom, the DNA test, or the war between her parents. They only knew she missed someone, and that absence left a void no child should have to carry. The question that lingers. The Carter vs. Ellis case faded from the headlines as new stories captured the public's attention. But its impact lingered like a bruise. It became a touchstone for debates about family, fatherhood, and the law, inspiring articles, documentaries, and even a made-for-TV movie that dramatized the saga. A montage of articles, a documentary poster, and a TV movie scene about the case, fading into a courtroom now empty, the gavel silent, symbolizing the story's enduring echo. But for those who lived it, Ethan, Rachel, and Lily, it was not a story but a wound. Raw and unhealed. Ethan never saw Lily again, not because he didn't want to, but because Rachel made it clear he was no longer welcome in her life. He considered fighting, appealing the court's decision, or petitioning for visitation as a psychological father, a legal status recognizing his emotional bond with Lily. But he was exhausted, worn down by years of battles, losses, and hopes that crumbled like ash. He retreated into himself, a man haunted by the love he'd lost. Rachel raised Lily alone, crafting stories to soothe her daughter's questions about her father. She spoke of a man who loved her but had to go away, carefully avoiding mention of Jake, the biological father she'd never tried to find. Perhaps she feared what she might discover, a man who wanted no part of Lily. Or worse, one who did. Perhaps she feared confronting her own role in the pain she'd caused. Whatever her reasons, she carried on, a single mother determined to give Lily a good life, even as she grappled with her own doubts. And Lily? She grew up, as children do, carrying a loss she couldn't fully name or understand. She'd ask about her father, and Rachel would deflect, changing the subject with practiced ease. She'd draw him in her pictures, and Rachel would offer a sad smile, unable to explain the void. An older Lily, teenage, looking at a photo of her with Ethan, her face contemplative. She's in a bedroom with her drawings, now more detailed, hinting at her search for identity. In the quiet moments, Lily would wonder why he stopped coming, why the man she called Daddy had vanished from her life. What do you believe? The story of Ethan and Rachel is both a tragedy and a challenge, forcing us to confront our deepest beliefs about family, love, and truth. Should a man who signs a birth certificate, raises a child, and sacrifices everything lose his place in that child's life because of a biological technicality? Or should the truth, however brutal, always take precedence, no matter the cost to those involved? There are no easy answers, no tidy resolutions. The comment sections of articles about this case are filled with raw emotion, passion, anger, heartbreak. Some hail Ethan as a hero, a man who loved beyond reason, whose devotion transcended biology. Others call him a fool, a man who clung to a lie he should have questioned sooner. Some see Rachel as a villain, a woman who used her daughter as a pawn to settle a personal score. Others view her as a survivor. A mother who fought for her truth in a world that often dismisses women like her. But the real answer lies with Lily. The child who lost the most in this battle. She is the one who will carry this story into the future. Long after the cameras have moved on and the courtroom stands empty. She is the one who will, one day, have to grapple with what it means to be a family. To love and be loved. To forgive or to hold fast to the truth. What do you believe? The debate is yours to join. A call to examine your own values and convictions. A diverse crowd in silhouette. Some holding signs, truth matters. Love wins, others typing on phones. Commenting online. The background is a courtroom fading into a question mark. Inviting viewer engagement. But in that Wisconsin courtroom, on that fateful day, only one voice mattered, the one that was never heard. The voice of a little girl named Lily. Alternate ending, a radical intervention. The courtroom was a pressure cooker. The air thick with anticipation as Judge Lauren Lake held the DNA results in her hands. Ethan Carter sat hunched, his calloused hands gripping the edge of the table, his eyes locked on the floor as if it might shield him from the coming blow. Rachel Ellis sat opposite, her arms tightly crossed, her face a complex mask of defiance, fear, and something softer, perhaps regret. The audience held its breath. The silence a tangible force, pressing against every heart in the room. Judge Lake opened the envelope, her eyes scanning the paper with deliberate care. She looked up, first at Ethan, then at Rachel, and finally at the packed gallery. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice steady but weighted with the gravity of the moment. "You are not the father." Judge Lake announcing the verdict, her face authoritative but compassionate. Ethan's face collapses. Rachel gasps softly. The audience frozen. The courtroom is tense, with the gavel prominent, and Ethan's photo of Lily visible in his pocket. The verdict crashed over Ethan like a tidal wave, sweeping away the foundation of his world. His face collapsed, his hands trembling as he clutched the table for support. A choked, guttural sound escaped his lips, not a sob, but a primal release of 3 years' worth of devotion dissolving into nothingness. The audience murmured, some wiping tears, others exchanging stunned glances. Rachel's reaction was restrained, a sharp intake of breath, a flicker of relief crossing her features. But no celebration, no clap of victory. Her eyes darted to Ethan, then away, as if she couldn't bear to witness the devastation she'd helped unleash. Judge Lake set the results down, her expression resolute, her presence commanding the room. "Ms. Ellis," she began, her voice firm, "you've got your truth today, and I respect the courage it took to seek it. But truth comes with a heavy responsibility. And I need you to hear me clearly. Where is this biological father? Where is the man who shares Lily's DNA? Because right now, all I see is a little girl who's about to lose the only constant father figure she's ever known." Rachel hesitated, her voice low and unsteady. "I don't know where Jake is," she admitted. "He left town years ago. I tried to find him. But, he's gone. He didn't want to be found." Judge Lake's gaze sharpened, her eyes boring into Rachel's. "Gone," she repeated, the word hanging in the air like an accusation. "So you have no father for Lily? Except the man sitting right here. Who's driven 160 miles every other weekend for 3 years? Who's paid child support on a mechanic's wage? Who's shown up when no one else in this world did? And you're prepared to let him walk out of her life? Just like that? Is that what you believe is best for your daughter?" Rachel's composure wavered, her hands clenching in her lap, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I wanted what's right for Lily," she said, her voice trembling. "I wanted her to know the truth about who she is. To grow up without lies." Judge Lake nodded, acknowledging the sentiment but not relenting. "The truth is one piece of the puzzle, Ms. Ellis, and it's an important one. But love, stability, and presence, those are pieces too. And they matter just as much, if not more, to a child's heart. Mr. Carter has given all of that and more. Day after day, year after year, despite every obstacle you've placed in his path. So here's what's going to happen in this courtroom today." Judge Lake announcing the co-parenting mandate, her face resolute, voice ringing with authority, Ethan's eyes light with tentative hope. Rachel's face tightens with shock, the audience buzzing with mixed reactions. The room leaned in, the air charged with anticipation. Ethan lifted his head, his eyes red but alert, a spark of hope flickering amidst the pain. Rachel froze, her breath catching in her throat, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. "I'm ordering a 6-month co-parenting evaluation period," Judge Lake declared, her voice ringing with authority. "Mr. Carter, you will retain your full visitation rights, unsupervised, every other weekend, exactly as they've been. Ms. Ellis, you will participate in mandatory co-parenting counseling with Mr. Carter, facilitated by a court-appointed family therapist. The purpose of this counseling is not to repair your personal relationship, that ship has sailed, but to rebuild enough trust and communication to prioritize Lily's well-being. At the end of 6 months, I will review the therapist's report. If both of you have demonstrated a genuine commitment to Lily's emotional and psychological needs, I will consider granting Mr. Carter legal recognition as her co-parent. Regardless of biological ties, if either of you fails to comply, or if the therapist determines that co-parenting is not in Lily's best interest, I will revisit the custody arrangement entirely, up to and including sole custody for one party. The audience erupted in a cacophony of gasps, cheers, and murmurs, a mix of shock, approval, and dissent rippling through the room. Ethan's jaw dropped, his eyes filling with tears, not of defeat, but of a fragile, tentative hope. Ethan leaving the courtroom, clutching Lily's photo, a faint smile breaking through his tears. The hallway is bright, symbolizing a new chance, with the unicorn visible in his bag. Rachel's face paled, her hands clenching tighter, her lips parting in protest. But he's not her father, she said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel in the courtroom hallway, alone, staring at a co-parenting counseling flyer. Her face is torn, anger, guilt, resolve, reflecting her struggle with the mandate. Judge Lake raised a hand, silencing her. He has been her father, Ms. Ellis, in every way that matters to a child. He's been there for Lily when no one else was. And she deserves the chance to keep that bond. At least until we know whether this biological father will ever step up. You need to decide what you're fighting for, your daughter's happiness, or your own need to be right. Because right now, Lily is the one paying the price for this war. Turning to Ethan, Judge Lake's tone softened, her eyes warm with empathy. Mr. Carter, you've shown this court what it means to be a father, not through biology, but through action, love, and sacrifice. I need you to keep showing up. Not just for Lily, but for yourself. Prove to her, to Ms. Ellis, to this court, that you're in this for the long haul, no matter what challenges come. Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his face, his voice thick with emotion. I will, Your Honor. I'll never stop. She's my daughter, always. The gavel fell, its sharp crack echoing through the courtroom, sealing the decision. The room buzzed with emotion, some audience members clapped, others whispered heatedly, already debating the ruling's implications. Ethan and Rachel left the courtroom separately, their paths diverging but bound by the 6-month clock now ticking. For Lily, the future hinged on their ability to put her needs above their pain. To find a way to coexist for the sake of a little girl who knew nothing of DNA but everything of love. Provocative reflection. Where do you stand? This alternate ending is deliberately unresolved, thrusting Ethan, Rachel, and the audience into a complex, uncharted landscape. It doesn't grant Ethan full victory, nor does it allow Rachel to walk away with sole control. Instead, it demands that both navigate a fraught co-parenting arrangement, prioritizing Lily's emotional stability over their personal grievances. A hopeful yet tense scene of Ethan and Rachel in a therapist's office. Sitting apart, Lily's drawing on the table between them. The therapist, a neutral figure, guides the session, the mood cautious but forward-looking. It challenges the supremacy of biology, elevating the role of emotional bonds in defining family. It's a messy, hopeful, and deeply contentious resolution, designed to spark debate and introspection long after the courtroom clears. Here's the provocative stance to ignite discussion. Courts should have the authority to mandate co-parenting arrangements for non-biological parents who've served as primary caregivers, even if the biological parent objects, provided it serves the child's emotional well-being. This position argues that a child's sense of security, rooted in consistent, loving relationships, should take precedence over genetic ties. It posits that Ethan, who has been Lily's father in every practical and emotional sense, deserves a legal stake in her life, even if Rachel opposes it. It challenges conventional definitions of family, asserting that devotion and presence outweigh ancestry in shaping a child's future. A courtroom scale balancing a DNA helix on one side and a heart-shaped family photo on the other, with Lily's silhouette in the center. Text reads, co-parenting over biology? The mood is challenging, inviting debate. Yet this stance is not without its thorns. What about Rachel's autonomy as Lily's mother to determine who shapes her daughter's life? What happens if Jake, the biological father, resurfaces, claiming his rights? Does mandating co-parenting unfairly penalize Rachel for seeking the truth? Or does it reward Ethan despite his past infidelity? Is it fair to force two people with a fractured history to collaborate, potentially prolonging conflict? These questions transform the issue into a lightning rod for debate, inviting passionate arguments from all sides. Now, the spotlight turns to you, the viewer. If you were part of this story, what would you do? How would you navigate the tangled web of love, truth, and responsibility? If you were Ethan, would you embrace the court-ordered co-parenting, knowing it means working alongside Rachel, who's caused you profound pain? Would you fight for legal recognition as Lily's co-parent? Or would you step back, believing that biology should define fatherhood? How much personal sacrifice would you endure to remain in Lily's life? And where would you draw the line? If you were Rachel, would you comply with the counseling and co-parenting mandate, allowing Ethan to stay in Lily's life despite the DNA results? Would you actively search for Jake, the biological father, or let him remain a ghost, prioritizing your own control over Lily's future? Would you acknowledge your role in letting Ethan believe he was the father? Or would you stand firm in your choices, believing they were justified? If you were Judge Lake, would you prioritize Lily's emotional bond with Ethan, enforcing a co-parenting arrangement? Or would you defer to Rachel's autonomy and the potential rights of the biological father? How would you balance the competing interests of the adults with the paramount need to protect a child's well-being? Would you risk an unconventional ruling to preserve a non-biological bond? If you were Lily, years from now, looking back on this pivotal moment, what would you wish Ethan and Rachel had done? Would you want Ethan to remain a co-parent, even without a biological tie? Or would you value knowing the truth about your origins above all? Would you resent Rachel for her decisions? Or would you empathize with her struggle to define your family? This story isn't just about Ethan, Rachel, and Lily, it's about all of us. Our values, our choices, and our definitions of what makes a family. It probes the gray area where love and truth collide, where no one emerges unscathed, and where the right path is anything but clear. So, take a stand, share your perspective, defend your position in the comments, with friends, or in your own heart. The verdict in this courtroom of life is still out, and your voice matters. What would you do? And why does this question resonate so deeply with you?